Before I set out on this little jaunt, everyone told me I was going to die. I applied to Sir Ranulph Fiennes' Transglobe Expedition Trust for funding, and they went away to their Amazonian expert, and he came back saying to try and walk the length of the Amazon is impossible. Luckily, they've got this lovely tradition of supporting mad but marvellous expeditions, so they went, okay, this guy clearly qualifies, he's mad, and if he comes back alive, that'll be marvellous, so they gave me some money. Everybody else told me it was impossible. My family and friends were, in fact, the only people who told me it was possible, were 100% supportive. My mum, for example, was like, yes, I know you can do it, Edward, which was really, really sweet, but it was slightly undermined by the fact she hadn't got a clue what she was talking about. The plan was very simple. We were going to leave the Pacific coast of Peru, walk up and over the mountains, find the furthest source of the Amazon, then walk pretty much the whole length of Peru, through the southern tip of Colombia, and then right across Brazil to the Atlantic Ocean. Logistically, that's pretty easy to do. You keep the river on the left-hand side, you keep walking downhill, and 2.5 years later, you end up at the Atlantic Ocean. In my mind, I wanted it to take a year. I took the length of the river, which is just over 4,000 miles, divided it by 365 days, and I came up with 11 miles a day. And I thought, yeah, I could walk 11 miles a day. But literally, with machete in hand, opening a sort of path through the jungle, for about 65% of the journey, we averaged 4 miles a day, so it took 860 days to complete. I started the expedition with the chap in the photo, Luke Collier. He was another expedition leader. We were based in London before, and we had every opportunity to go to the Royal Geographical Society in order to get the official coordinates for the official furthest source of the Amazon. But we never got around to it. We went to Wikipedia instead. And not surprisingly, the coordinates were completely wrong. We were on the wrong mountain. The river that flowed off it didn't even go into the Amazon basin. But we sort of used the force to eventually find this cross, which is quite famous. Well, it's on Wikipedia. And there's a little trickle of water you can just see coming down. It's quite a sort of idyllic notion of the furthest source of the Amazon. But we took a few photos, and then we also saw another cross, an iron cross in a different location, and then 2 further plaques, all claiming to be the official furthest source of the Amazon. So we thought, this is rubbish. There can't be 4 official sources of the Amazon. So we decided to summit the mountain, 5,600 meters, Nevado Mismi, and we thought, there's definitely no water above us now. We can start walking the Amazon. And in a number of ways, from this point on, things did start to go a bit downhill, primarily, actually, with my relationship with Luke. We're very, very different characters, and we had very different ideas about how to lead the expedition, and it got to the stage where it was just like a bad marriage. We rubbed up against each other the wrong way. The way Luke would drink his coffee in the morning and couldn't talk to anyone else because he had to concentrate on his coffee so much would really me off. And I'm sure I him off massively in return as well. But it got to the stage where after 3 months he said, Ed, I've had enough of you, I'm going home, which he did. Just coincidentally at this point, the expedition started to get a lot more serious. This building here is a Rondero outpost in the Red Zone. The Red Zone is the drugs trafficking area of Peru. 2/3 of the world's cocaine is actually grown in this area that the headwaters of the Amazon go through. It then gets shipped up to Colombia to be processed, but it's grown in Peru. Increasingly, these guys were the people I was asking for advice and permission to come through, and they're sort of funded by the drugs traffickers. And they were more and more often saying, you can't come through here. You're a white man with an HD video camera on your shoulder. You're going to get yourself killed. The Red Zone also spills into this area, very, very closed-off Amerindian tribes. These 2 guys are Ashaninka Indians. You can see their shorts and T-shirt wearing, but they're 100% indigenous, and it was pretty scary, I have to admit. And I walked with these 2 guys for about a day and a half, and they walked with me to the next town, and that's how I tried to sort of work it. I tried to get somebody from each little community, each little village, to walk with me to the next community. And it worked, but it was a little bit unsustainable. I walked into one community called Pamakiadi, and basically there was no one in the community at all. It was all like a sort of tumbleweed moment. And then this woman ran out shrieking and chucked a bucket of water all over me. And then this other woman ran out and she had red plant dye on her hands, and she smeared it all over my face. And this big group sort of surrounded me, and they were very, very angry that I was there. And I didn't really know what to do. And then at the back of the group, there was a much taller lady who was wearing sort of indigenous face paint and earrings and everything. And she caught my eye and sort of stepped forward through the crowd and held out her hand and said, are you English? My name's Emily. And she was an Italian anthropologist. And she's like, have you got any idea where you are and what these people have been through? And I have to admit, I didn't really. And Emily was able to sort of talk to me about the history of of the Shanikas and how in the 80s and 90s there'd been the Shining Path had come in and wiped out whole generations of men and violated the women over and over again. So not surprisingly, these guys live in an incredibly defensive, protective manner. And so rather than feel any negativity towards this, I ended up, due to Emily, feeling very proud of them. Emily managed to get me a permit in order to go through these, through her influence. And she also introduced me to the guy on the left who's called Cho. And Cho was a forestry worker, and I sat down with Cho, and we estimated that we've got 5 days of walking to get out of the red zone, the dangerous area. And Cho walked with me for 5 days. We got on really well. We got on okay at the beginning. After 5 days, he goes, "I'm quite enjoying this, Ed. I'll walk with you to the next town if you want." And in the next town, he said, "Well, if you want, I'll walk with you all the way to the mouth of the Amazon," which is what he did. He literally never went home and walked for 2 years with me. He's become a really good friend, actually. He came over to England after we finished the expedition. I lived with my mum up in Leicestershire and played rugby for my rugby club, which was quite nice. And at the end of season dinner, they gave him Overseas Player of the Year. At the beginning of 2009, the world's economy was collapsing. Banks were going to the wall, governments were bailing the banks out, and I thought, what a brilliant place to be in the middle of the jungle where nothing can touch me and I don't have to get stressed. And then I got an email from my main sponsor saying, "Really sorry, Ed, but we've run out of money." So we're 14 months into the expedition with 14 months left to go. And because the expedition had taken so much longer than I envisaged, all the kit was breaking. Our insurance had run out. We got no insurance at all. The most important bit of kit that broke was the GPS. When that broke, we were over 100 kilometers from the main channel of the Amazon in the middle of nowhere and had to resort to using map and compass to navigate. Brazilians have got amazing maps of their country, 1 to 100,000 maps, topographical maps, but they're military maps, and so they wouldn't give them to us. So I was having to navigate using a 1 to 4 million map of the top half of South America. It's got 9 countries on it, and 1 millimeter on the map is 4 kilometers on the ground, so slightly farcical. But despite the fact that I suppose everything was going wrong, it ended up being the most enthralling part of the expedition because we sort of had to live on our wits. But it wasn't terribly sustainable, and we were carrying a internet satellite link, as you can see in the photo, a began. Essentially, we had to find a fallen tree in the jungle, and then the corresponding sort of hole in the jungle canopy, point this thing up, and we had the fastest internet in the whole of the Amazon. I knew Michael Jackson was dead within 2 minutes of it being announced on the internet, and I was right in the middle of the jungle. And bizarrely, my sister emailed me asking me if I was okay, because I used to be a big Michael Jackson fan. But I was fine. And then basically I was able to upload tweets and photos and blogs and videos, and I thought, right, I've got this following online now, I've got no money, I'm just going to put a plea out to the people who are following the expedition. So I put a PayPal link on the website and asked people to donate. And the response was, I have to say, utterly humbling. We had kids in South Africa donating their pocket money, we had kids in England coming into school with their teddy bears, buying each other's teddy bears off each other and going home with each other's teddy bears and then giving me all the money, which I felt a little bit guilty about, actually. But it was an unbelievable response that the people who who were following the expedition wanted it to continue. And in the last year, we got £43,000 that came in into the expedition to keep the whole thing alive and buy new kit and reinsure us, etc.
It's an obvious thing, isn't it, walking through a forest like this, that if you let it get to you, that it's going to be so much harder. And yet it is so difficult at times, keeping your sense of humour, because deep down you don't find it very funny. It's not very funny.
It wasn't very funny, really. I lost my sense of humour, certainly towards the end of the expedition. This photo's taken 2 years into the expedition, and I'd got about 4 months left to walk. And I don't know whether it was because I knew I was going to get to the end, and therefore I became a bit complacent, but I let my guard drop mentally. And you'd think, wouldn't you, that the biggest dangers of walking the Amazon would be your anacondas and your venomous snakes and your jaguars and all of the sort of things that conjure up, or maybe the indigenous tribes. But actually, for me, the far, far hardest thing was just holding it together mentally. And at this stage, the most minor things would go wrong. I don't know, Cho would be 2 minutes late before walking, so we'd get a delay. And I'd be sent spiraling into this into either real negativity or real anger or frustration, and I was just really annoyed at myself that I was doing something that I really loved, and I actually thought I was going to get to the end, and yet my default mood was negative, and I thought, okay, I need to do something about this. I don't want the last four months of the expedition to be crap. So I actually used the satellite phone to call up a neurolinguistic programming expert, a sort of an NLP guru. It's not very Ranulph Fiennes, is it, to admit that you needed counselling in the middle of your expedition, but I did. But I just wanted a few tricks on how to take control of my brain. And the guy was brilliant, actually. And he gave me a lot of tips, and he said, it's not surprising that you're struggling mentally because you've been isolated from Western society, certainly for such a long period of time. And one of the things that he did in order to try and regain my perspective was to get me to imagine somebody in my life who was really inspirational to me. And I would imagine my first sergeant major, who was a guy called Mark Hale. And he was a massive bloke, rugby player, devout Christian. He was doing an MSc in psychology, so not a typical squaddy at all. He was really an inspiration to me. And when I could feel myself going into one of these negative, almost childish moods, I would imagine Mark there just sort of smiling amusedly at me. He was just saying, "Sir, what on earth are you doing?" And of course, I wouldn't have acted like that had Mark been there, or had anyone been there, really. And so it did lift me. It enabled me to get a bit more perspective and realize, and just laugh at myself in some respects. That story's a little bit more personal. I never checked the internet for news. We didn't have enough battery power. We didn't have enough bandwidth on the satellite phone. But I opened the BBC website this day, and the main story was soldier dies in an explosion in Afghanistan. And it was Mark, and he'd been trying to save another soldier, and he got killed, and he left his wife Brenda and his 2 teenage daughters. And undeniably, it was the saddest day of the expedition for me. But as I sat there, I thought, isn't it incredible that this is the guy that I've chosen in order to make me positive, in order to finish the expedition? So even after his death, I continued to use Mark and use his memory to get the job done. It gets happier, I promise. It won't probably surprise you by now, but I'd messed up navigationally. I was using Google Earth to navigate by the end of the expedition because it had the most information on it and the most up-to-date information. But it's really quite difficult to tell the difference between a disused telegraph wire and a road on Google Earth, and I obviously thought one was the other, and we just hit this disused telegraph wire with just a wall of brambles and razor grass and vines, and it was impossible to get down. So we spilled out into what was the actual road network about 4 days late, and you can't avoid it. There's a big metropolis at the mouth of the Amazon called Belém, and a big road network, and we just had about a week of feasting days, really, really long days, virtually no sleep, about 20 hours before we were due to get to the beach, and we'd got a couple of film crews that had agreed to be there, and we'd got our flights booked for the next day. About 20 hours before, I collapsed at the side of the road, just complete exhaustion. Ended up having sort of 2 hours enforced sleep, and then we had 17 hours to do 85 kilometres, and we walked all the way through the afternoon, all the way through the evening, all the way through the night. And then as the sun started to come up, these media teams sort of descended on us, and the sort of top lights in our head and paparazzi-style photographs, and Joe and I just started floating down the road, although we were physically completely destroyed. And then suddenly we could smell the salt in the air, and we knew that we were near the sea. And then we could hear the sounds of the waves crashing in the distance, and then we rounded this corner, and we could just see the Atlantic Ocean stretched out in front of us. Joe and I just grinned at each other and instinctively shrugged off our rucksacks and just legged it down the beach as fast as we could. And also instinctively, I'm not really sure why, we started holding hands as we ran down the beach. And I just thought, it's typical, isn't it, that one day in your life that the world's media is looking at you and you're holding hands, skipping down the beach. You can see the grin on Joe's face in that image. He'd never seen the sea before at this point. He'd never literally tasted salt water, and he deserves a massive mention. He always knew that he wouldn't be able to say that he'd walked the length of the Amazon because he joined in month 5, but he did the hard bit, and he did it for such incredibly selfless reasons, for completely selfless reasons, to support me, to help me out, that he deserves a massive amount of credit. That's my story. Thank you very much indeed. Ask a few questions.
Thank you, Ed. That is just such a remarkable story that we're just going to capture a couple of minutes just to ask Ed some of the questions that I'm sure must be going through your mind. What strikes me, Ed, about one of the incredible things about your story is that in that period and in that environment, you never got ill. Is that true? Or?
Yeah, it is. I just think I was really lucky, actually. And with so many things on this expedition, so many things could have gone wrong, which would have meant that we'd have died or something. And we had loads of luck. Cho always said that God was walking with us. I'm not religious. I didn't think that, but it certainly made me wonder a few times. We just had so much luck. Yeah, we didn't get dengue or typhoid or malaria. I mean, I got leishmaniasis in my arm, but that's not serious. It can mutate into a variant called mucocutaneous leishmaniasis, which eats away your soft palate. You're left with a permanent hole in your mouth, which, in place of your nose and your mouth, which I didn't really want. But I just had to give myself 20 days of intravenous injections, and that went away. But that was pretty much it.
Apart from the insect in your skull you were telling me last night.
I did have it's not serious at all, but I had a botfly living in my head. Botflies, they lay their eggs on the inside of mosquitoes, and then mosquitoes go and bite mammals, or in my case, my head, and then the eggs drop off because they feel the heat of the mammal, and then they grow into this little maggot inside your head, which isn't serious at all, but it's just annoying because it keeps you awake at night because it's like this little pin pricking as it eats away at your flesh. And you can't squeeze them out if they're alive because they've got these little reverse barbs on them. But we used the super glue that I got for mending my false teeth and suffocated it, and it had a little epi inside my head, and Joe, I squeezed it out.
I'm just glad you didn't bring any photographs. Okay, what on earth does an explorer do next? Can you tell us? I know there may be some secrecy around this, but what do you do next when you've walked the Amazon?
Well, I mean, it's opened up so many opportunities. I've got another expedition that I want to do, which is another world first expedition starting in September next year. I haven't announced it yet, I'm afraid, but I'm just going through the process of getting sponsorship together for that and getting potential TV deals as well.
I'm sure you'll have some followers here. So thanks again to Ed Stafford.
Thank you very much.